Just a little housekeeping before we get started. I just remembered to turn off my cell phone. I was grateful nobody called me during that prayer, and I would have been embarrassed. But at any rate, if you've not turned off your cell phone or turned it on silent or either on vibrate, let me encourage you to go ahead and do that. Again, we appreciate your being here today. You know, I've had some to tell me how encouraging this is, and I'm grateful for that. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to encourage one another to do the work of our Lord and trying to get His gospel out into a lost and dying world. There's a large world, and we have great opportunities. We just need to see those opportunities, don't we? And so today, we have Brother John Grubb here today speaking to us on the topic of lifting up our eyes in Taiwan. Brother John has been preaching the gospel since 1970. All but 12 of those years he's been involved in mission work, so he's very experienced. He spent 10 years as a missionary in Taiwan. He also is fluent in Mandarin Chinese and can read and does write Chinese. So he's in his 35th year of working among the Chinese people around the world. And of course, there's a lot of Chinese people not only in China, but as he just mentioned, around the world. He translates material into the Chinese language. He's produced 185 videos in the Chinese language, plus, of course, dozens of videos in the English language at World Video Bible School in Maxwell, Texas. And it's likely that we will have them featured next year. Talk about the work that they are doing. He also helped in producing radio lessons for broadcast in China. He has a website that you can go to and download some of these materials if you're interested in that at grubbchinese.org. He's made about 60 mission trips and traveled into about 22 nations preaching the gospel of Christ. And of course, he does a lot of gospel meeting work and lectureship work here. We appreciate Brother John and the work that he does. He has overseers of the Chestnut Mountain Church of Christ in Chestnut, for some reason I can't say Chestnut, Mountain, Georgia. And at any rate, he's here to speak to us today, and I think we're going to be encouraged and edified by that, and we look forward to hearing about the work in Taiwan. Brother John. Okay, I'll come up and we'll have 5 minutes.
Okay, right, thanks. I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here, for the invitation to speak on this mission forum. I'm thankful that the church here has decided to conduct a mission forum. I was director of the Truth of the World Mission Forum for 11 years, so I remember all of the details and the responsibilities involved in that. I believe we had 18 mission forums during the time that I worked with Truth of the World. I've been working among the Chinese, as Billy said, for a number of years, and I'm thankful today that I have the opportunity to be here. Now, you see on the screen some Chinese characters. Those are not for you unless you're Chinese. But if you're Chinese, then if you have problems with the English, you can read the Chinese. And the funds are here from China, and so this will help her, especially Sister Young, especially to see what I'm talking about this morning in the lesson. We also have another visitor, I think, that has come to also listen to the lesson who is Chinese. And so what I'm trying to do in all of my PowerPoint materials, wherever I go in the world, is to do them both in English and Chinese. So that even if I'm presenting a lesson only in English, but there are some Chinese people in the audience, then they're able to at least read what I'm talking about and keep up with the lesson. I do a lot of bilingual preaching, where I preach in both English and Chinese at the same time. And if you've never tried that, that's really fun, to do that. And so one of the recent projects that I've been working on at World Video Bible School is a production of an English-Chinese DVD. And so this first DVD has 3 lessons on it. On the deity of Christ, and it's in English and Chinese at the same time. So I do a sentence in English and then a sentence in Chinese, then a sentence in English and a sentence in Chinese for 38 minutes in each lesson. And so there are copies of this DVD on the table in the display room, about the middle of the displays. Also copies of my Grubb Mission Report that you can pick up and read. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity today to talk about lifting up our eyes in Taiwan. It's going to be hard for me to not step on Billy's topic because he's talking about China in the next hour, and I just got back from Shanghai on Monday. And so there'll be a little bit of that in my lesson, although I'll try to keep it limited to Taiwan, although I have to do some preliminary work before I talk about Taiwan. We're already aware of the passages that emphasize our responsibility to go into all the world and carry the gospel to every creature. And of course, last night, Brother B.J. Clark did an excellent job in talking about the responsibilities that we as children of God have in going into all the world and preaching that saving message. And we're so thankful for that lesson. But if you've not studied these passages that you see on the screen, then you can write them down, or you can take your camera and take a picture of it, and then you can look at it later. I will never forget, a couple of years ago, I conducted a gospel meeting in Kampar, Malaysia, and it was a bilingual meeting. I did both English and Chinese, and it was the first time in all of my preaching that whenever a new screen came up, all the phones came out, and people took a picture of the screen so that they could look at it later. So instead of taking notes, they just took a picture of the PowerPoint screen. And so I see that a little bit once in a while. And so that's you can do that if you'd like to, although I'm leaving this screen. I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of some of the efforts among the Chinese people. During the early 1900s, there were efforts made especially in southern China. Brother George Benson was one of the missionaries that went to China. In 1911, the Qing dynasty ended in China, and it was the beginning of the Republic of China in 1911. But during those periods, there were all kinds of conflicts and wars. It was very difficult for people to proclaim the gospel under the conditions that existed during that time. And so because of those conflicts, and of course eventually the coming of the Second World War, most of our families that were working in China during that particular period of time were forced to leave. Brother Benson, of course, left China and went to Africa. And we think of all of the work that has been done in Africa as a result of that change. And so we can thank God for that. But we also recognize probably, although I don't have documentation on this, that probably most of the teaching that was being done in China before World War II was probably being done in the Cantonese dialect, because they were working primarily in Canton province during that particular time. After World War II, missionaries began to once again work among the Chinese people, especially in places like Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. It was 1955, and I know Billy's going to talk a little bit about this, so I won't dwell on it. But it was in 1955 that the Rice family moved to Singapore and began to do the work that culminated in efforts that were made in other parts of Asia. And so this is a little bit of the background of the history of the work. When we talk about the religious background since the 1950s, we again recognize that these are the main countries where work was being done among the Chinese people. It was being done in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, in China. Now that doesn't mean there were not other efforts being made among Chinese people in other parts of the Pacific and Southeast Asia. I was talking with the brother from American Samoa last night, and he mentioned the fact that Don Thornton was in American Samoa for a while, and he's now been in Hong Kong for well over 30 years. And so even in Samoa, there are a lot of Chinese-speaking people. And so the efforts that have been made since 1950 have been primarily in these particular areas. The future, people often ask me, who will replace you when you die? You know, that's a concern that people have about the future of the work. And of course, the answer to that question is, I have no idea who will replace what I'm doing. What I'm thankful for in 2016 is we now have many brethren who are Chinese, who are able to do the work themselves. And so I've been privileged to have some small part in helping to train some of our Chinese gospel preachers that are living in Singapore and Malaysia and China, in Taiwan. And these are the brethren who will take up the work that needs to be done when some of our older preachers like us pass from the scene. And so this is something that always needs to be done, but I'm thankful for the fact that we do have the local brethren that can do the work. Now, is it something that I would encourage Americans to do, to go over and work among the Chinese people? Certainly. But when I think back at all of the efforts that we made in order to learn the Chinese language, and you think Chinese is hard, you ought to try to be Chinese and learn English. You know, English is the hardest language in the world to learn. Chinese is hard, Russian's hard. But, you know, it's difficult to learn a second language and to be able to communicate in that language without the use of a translator. And the older you get, the harder it is to learn that language. And so certainly it is my hope and prayer that in the future we will have American preachers, American families, who will be interested in going and working among Chinese people around the world. But I'm also thankful for the fact that we have a number of Chinese brethren in these countries who are now preaching and teaching the gospel. Since the early 1960s, efforts have been made to prepare a workforce to carry the gospel to mainland China. One of the results of this effort was Four Seas College of Bible and Missions, and Billy's going to talk about that in his lesson, so I'm not going to dwell on that. Another result was the sending of missionaries to Taiwan during the 1970s and 80s. In the 21st century, there are now those in mainland China who are being trained to preach the gospel. They're being trained in some schools here in the United States, like Memphis School of Preaching, like the Southwest School of Preaching. They're being trained in schools like Four Seas College in Singapore. And so we're thankful that there are a number of other efforts being made in China to help spread the gospel. We have American brethren who are traveling into China, who are teaching in universities. They're teaching in the English departments, or they're teaching in some other university department. And while they're there, they are then able to teach the gospel to people in China. I know one of our preachers in Singapore, Brother Jedediah Yuan, he was in school in Beijing when he obeyed the gospel. And so this is just one example of that. And then, of course, we have visitors from various countries to go and preach the gospel in China. Now, this is a map of China, not a very good one maybe, but this is just a map to show you and to talk about the fact that we have a website. And Billy mentioned the address already, grubbchinese.org. You can go to that website. It's got some English in it, so you can navigate a little bit. But primarily, this website is for Chinese people. One side of the website is for traditional. The other side is for simplified. And Chinese people can go in there and pick the particular kind of written Chinese character that they can read. We also have radio programs, audio radio programs on the website. And of course, by going to wvbs.org, World Video Bible School, you can contact the brethren there and get involved with the more than 185 videos that I have made down there. Now, this is a collage of the speakers of the 2015 Chinese Asian Bible Lectureship. Every year in Singapore, primarily in Malaysia, we have a lectureship where all the Chinese brethren in Southeast Asia who are able to come together for a lectureship. And except for the guy on the far left, all of these preachers are Chinese. They're Chinese preachers from Taiwan, from Malaysia, from China, from Singapore. And in these areas, we've got Chinese preachers. And you can see here are, I think, 14 or 15 different preachers, maybe not all of them full-time preachers. But these are men who are able to preach the gospel in Chinese that are living in Southeast Asia. In 2016, we had the Chinese Asian Bible Lectureship in Malacca, Malaysia, and we had approximately 200 people to attend this particular lectureship. Brethren from Singapore and Malaysia, from Taiwan, from mainland China, and one guy from the United States of America. And so this is something that goes on every year, and it is an opportunity for brethren in Southeast Asia who speak Mandarin Chinese to come together for a series of lectureships and fellowship. Over the last few years, we've always had one or two or even three obey the gospel during the Chinese Asian Bible Lectureship, because we have friends that come with some of our members from various countries and are then taught the gospel while they are there for the lectureship. Okay, well, we've talked about some background information as quickly as possible. As Billy mentioned, when you've been, as Robert Martin understands and Steve Weiss understands, when you've been doing this kind of stuff for a long time, it's hard to boil it down into one 45-minute presentation because of the things that you've done. But I'm just trying to give you an overview of some of these things as we now begin to talk about Taiwan. After World War II, we had American military individuals in Taiwan, living in Taiwan. So after about 1950, we began to have some American military congregations begin in Taiwan. And it was in the mid to late 50s, 1950s, that we began to have American missionaries to travel to Taiwan, to move to Taiwan, and to work among the Chinese people. Those efforts began with a number of missionaries back in the 1950s and 60s. But then in the 1970s, Brother Ira Rice came up with an idea. Let's try to get 12 families to move to the 6 major centers of the island, and let's get them to learn the Chinese language and then be able to work among the Chinese people in Taiwan by preaching in the language, the Mandarin language. Of course, Taiwan has a lot of dialects as well as other parts of China. There's Taiwanese and there's Hakka, and there's a lot of the Aborigine languages, but just about everybody speaks Mandarin in Taiwan as well as throughout China. And so the idea was, let's get 12 families to go over there and do that kind of work. Well, we were not able to get 12 families to go over. At one time, the most we had, I believe, were 8 families that were working in Taiwan among the Chinese people. Right now, there's only one that is left in Taiwan that is one of those original American families. But since moving back from Taiwan in 1992, I have made annual trips to Taiwan. I go every year. Sometimes I've gone twice a year on various occasions to continue to encourage and help the work among the Chinese people in Taiwan. Now, the idea behind this was, let's get a workforce ready in Taiwan. Just like back in the 1950s and 60s, let's get a workforce ready in Singapore so that when the day comes when the doors to China opens up, we'll have a workforce ready to go in. That was the idea behind it. One of the problems that existed with this plan, or any plan, is it's very difficult, especially in Taiwan, and I certainly don't have time to talk about this morning in the limited time available. There's a problem with the background of the Chinese people, the Eastern religious background, the problem of materialism that exists among the Chinese people, the fact that there are already more than 300 denominations in existence in Taiwan. You've got all of these things that are affecting your ability to be able to reach people with the gospel. And so the work in Taiwan through the years has been a very slow and difficult work. And yet we have produced some gospel preachers that are working not only in Taiwan, but have also been able to travel to China as well. The churches that currently exist in Taiwan, we have a faithful congregation in Taipei. There's a congregation in Taichung. There's also a congregation in Tainan, in Kaohsiung, and in Hualien. There are 23 million people living on the island of Taiwan. Now that's a lot of people. I just came back from Shanghai. There are 30 million people that live in Shanghai, one city in China. But 23 million people living in Taiwan. And we've got about 6 congregations that exist on the entire island. So certainly there's a lot of work that can be done and needs to be done among the Taiwanese people living on that island. Well, let's go to Hualien and talk a little bit about the workers there. This is Wang Yongxiong, Brother Boaz Wang, who is about my age. Brother Wang was a sign maker. That was his occupation. He was also an instructor of karate. He had a 5th degree black belt in karate, and he taught karate for a number of years. Brother Wang is a very capable preacher of the gospel and is working in Hualien and has been working there full time as a preacher since 1992. Brother Wang works among 3 separate congregations there on in the city of Hualien. Hualien's a smaller city in the island. There's only about 300,000 people that live in Hualien. It's sandwiched in between the Pacific Ocean and mountains. And so it's a smaller area in Hualien. But Brother Wang, for the past several years, has been working among people in assisted living. And so currently there are 2 congregations in Hualien that are located in assisted living homes. This is one of the places that they go every Sunday morning at 7 o'clock. Also in a midweek afternoon class, they go there for a Bible class on Thursday afternoon. Then they also have opportunities to go during the week to conduct Bible studies. Last year, not this year, because I just came back from Taiwan on this particular trip. Last year in 2015, we had about 60 members of the church in this particular congregation in the assisted living home. The problem is when the average age of your members are about 90, from year to year, you're losing some members. And so this year they had about 50 in the congregation because the ages range from about 68 to 104. And so they've got and those are all members of the church in the age range. We had a sister that lived to be 104 and passed away last year. And they still have one that's 102. And so this is one of the areas of work in Hualien. Here you can see a picture from the front. And there's a sister right in the front that you can, I don't hear my volume, so I don't know if my remote's on or not. But sister sitting right there in the front is blind. And so she's been a faithful member of the church. I've been going to the assisted living home for a number of years. She's always there for every service. Here are some of the members of the congregation in Hualien. This is at the church building. The church building in Hualien is paid for. So they're able to meet there on a regular basis for Bible study and worship. We'll go to the city of Taichung. This is where I lived for 10 years. Brother John Yo is currently the full-time preacher there in the city of Taiwan, and his wife, Michelle, is a native Singaporean. Brother Yo went to Four Seas College for about a year and studied there in the school, and while he was there, he met his wife. And so she is now working with him and has been working side by side with him for over 25 years. They have a son named Benedict. I told Ben, we call him Ben, by the way. I said, Ben, if you ever go to America, don't tell anybody your name is Benedict. I said, that's just not a good name in America. So just tell them your name's Ben. Well, anyway, Ben is an art student in Singapore right now. He goes to the LaSalle Art School in Singapore, and he is an excellent artist. And not only is he able to paint, but he speaks English, Mandarin, and Taiwanese, and is able to preach in all 3 of those languages. And so we're looking forward to the efforts that he'll be able to make in the future. He's hoping to go to London in a couple of years to do his master's in art. And so he'll have opportunities to expand his abilities. And this is a picture of Brother Yo. They have an assisted living congregation in Taichung as well. This is Sunday morning at 8 o'clock before we go over to the church building for the morning service. And the majority of the people living in assisted living do not speak Mandarin. They speak Taiwanese. And so I'm standing there, I'm speaking in Mandarin, and Brother Yo is translating into Taiwanese. That's what Brother Wong does for me as well. And so one thing about preaching through a translator is when you've already know that second language, you kind of have a feeling for the ebb and flow of translating. And so I can usually hear when Brother Yo or Brother Wong's finished with the translation, then I go on to the next point. Here's a picture of Brother and Sister Yo that I took late in August of this year when I was there working with the congregation in Taichung. Here is a picture of some. We had a lectureship in Taichung last year, and this is a picture of some of those. Some of the individuals that you see in this picture are from Singapore. There are some also from Malaysia, but this is a group of the brethren from Taiwan, and this is on the roof of the church building. The church building in Taichung, again, it's already purchased. They own the building. It's a fourth-floor apartment that they've turned into a church building, but they also have access to the roof. And so they have remodeled the roof and put a real strong covering over it because they had one of these corrugated metal coverings, and the last typhoon just took it out like that. So they put a real typhoon-proof covering on it, and that's where the baptistry is located as well. And they're able to have their fellowship and get-togethers on that particular roof. Go to the next slide, will you please? Mine's not working. Can you fast forward me to the next slide? Thank you. This is a brother and sister in the congregation in Taichung. He is currently in the military, in the Army. He's getting ready to get out in a year or two, and he plans to use his retirement money that he'll receive from the Army. He gets a lump sum amount. He's planning to use that to come to the United States to go to preacher training school. In other words, he's going to pay for it himself. And then when he finishes, he plans to go back to the city of Taichung and help with the work in that particular city. Okay, it looks like I'm back online. Here's Taipei. Now, the work in Taipei has been a difficult work through the years. In the past 40 years or so, we used to have a number of congregations, the last 50 years or so, we had a number of congregations in Taipei, which is the capital of Taiwan. But the problem is, through the years, as in many other countries, as well as in the United States, the church was racked and afflicted with liberalism. And so many of those congregations have gone into a kind of a community church mode in their worship and in their activities. And so the work that we have currently is a very small work. This is Brother William Chun, who graduated a couple of years ago from the Southwest School of Preaching. And William has been working with his wife Yolanda there in the city of Taipei. William is a native of Taipei. Yolanda is a native of Taichung, where I lived. And I actually had the privilege to teach and baptize Yolanda into Christ back in the mid-1980s. But they've been working with the congregation in Taipei. That's William speaking at one of our lectureships. William is a brilliant individual. He's very smart. He's got his he's got a doctorate in food science, and he's very meticulous in the preparation of his lessons. Now, this is another brother in Taipei. This is Brother Zhao. Brother Zhao is actually the brother who lived in Hualien at the time that I moved to Taiwan, and he gave me my Chinese name. And so my Chinese name came from Brother Zhao Shouliang. Brother Zhao worked for the government. He worked for the government for a number of years before he retired, and he is now retired, but he continues to work with the congregation in Taipei. He's not a trained preacher, but he does a lot of preaching. Here are some of the members in Taipei. The church there is very small. It's very weak, and we want to continue to remember all of these congregations in our prayers. Now, a few years ago, Brother Wong started a new work in Tainan. Tainan is down in the southwest part of the island of Taiwan, and his mother and father lived in Tainan. That's where Brother Wong was from originally, and so Brother Wong decided to try to make an effort down in that particular part of the country to begin a congregation. And so every week he would travel from Hualien down to Tainan to help with this particular effort. Now his parents have moved to Hualien, and I have suggested to Brother Wong that he now spend more of his time in Hualien to try to build up the work there and allow the church in Kaohsiung, which is about an hour from Tainan, to take over the efforts that are being made, because many of the people that you see in this picture will actually travel to Kaohsiung on Sunday to worship. They do not have a place to meet in Tainan. This is a meeting that took place just this last September when I was in Tainan. We're actually meeting on the porch of a friend of Brother Wong's. He's not even a member of the church, but he gave us a place to meet outside of his house, and you cannot tell from the picture, but it is pouring down rain when I took this picture. And he had one of those corrugated tin roofs. And it was really raining hard. It wasn't typhoon rain, but it sure sounded like it. And so that night, I had to talk loud. And I have a problem talking loud. I have a very soft voice, as you can tell. And I gave all of my volume that I had, because even though it's a small area, because of the rain, I had to really speak loud. Well, a couple days later, we were meeting in a restaurant in this same city, and we didn't want to disturb the other people in the restaurant. We were over kind of in a corner having a Bible study. So that night, I spoke very softly. So I told them, this kind of averages it out. One night I did real loud, the next time I did soft, and so it kind of balanced itself out. But this is a work that has been going on in Tainan. Then in the southwest corner of Taiwan is the church in Kaohsiung. The church in Kaohsiung has been there for quite a long time, over 30 years. And there is an American family worshiping there. This is one of the older couples that helps do the work there in Kaohsiung. This is a gospel meeting that I conducted just this past September. I guess that was last month, wasn't it? When I was in early in September in Taiwan and preaching a gospel meeting there. And they meet in the first floor of the house of the brethren that live in that particular city. Well, I ran through it pretty quick. So I've got how much time left? Okay, I got 4 minutes left. When I do a presentation, I always try to put up some useful websites. Now, I know I don't have them all up here, but the top one there is the Grubb Chinese website, if you'd like to access that. Most of the materials in Chinese, every file has an English title, so at least you know what it's about. You have to trust me for the rest. The rest of it's in Chinese. And so you can go there and access that material. I've already mentioned World Video Bible School today as well. The material that's available from them in so many different languages. English and Chinese and Russian and Korean and German and French. All kinds of languages that they have available. So please take advantage of that website. And then, of course, everybody in this area knows about GBN. I don't need to tell you about GBN's website, but you can access that. Also, Online Academy of Bible Studies is a good website that you can access. There are a lot of archived lessons on that website. You can listen to sermons from preachers over the past 20 or 25 years from different lectureships. And so that's a good website. And then the ibtministries.org, this is the Ron Gilbert website. And there are a number of good Bible correspondence courses available on that website as well. So these are some websites that you can access. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I'm glad I did not run over in the time that was allotted me. If you have questions about the work that we're trying to do among the Chinese people, feel free to ask me those questions. I'll be happy to talk to you about those. Continue to pray for the efforts that we're making in Southeast Asia, to continue to preach the gospel among the Chinese people, to do it in their own language, so that they can then turn around and use their own abilities and language to carry the gospel to the more than 1.4 billion Chinese people that are living on this earth. In November next month, I'll be going to Singapore for the Four Seas College lectureship. I'll see Billy there and Tim while I'm there, and others that may be going. And then I'll go to Indonesia for 3 days to teach over there, and then I'll go up into Malaysia and work with brethren in Malaysia until the 19th of December. Then next year I'll be traveling to New Zealand, the 31st of January through the 14th of March. And there are a number of Chinese people that live in New Zealand now. In fact, some of the churches that exist in Australia and New Zealand now have been fortified by Chinese Christians that have moved down from Singapore and Malaysia and other places. And so I'll have opportunities to work among some Chinese people in New Zealand. I have 3 other trips planned for next year, continuing to do what I can to help spread the gospel to the whole world. Brethren, let's continue to work together to take the gospel to this whole world. Let's do what we can. I know we can't do it all, but let's do what we can to carry the gospel to all the world.
Thank you so much, Brother Grubb. Certainly enlightening, and to get a little bit of history as to the background of some of the work that's going on in Taiwan and among the Chinese people especially. And my lesson next hour, Lord willing, will kind of just come in as a follow-up of this, and then we will start branching out into some other areas as well. We do have refreshments prepared over on the other building, and some fresh Krispy Kreme donuts. I'm pushing those for some reason, this lectureship, aren't I? And coffee. And anyway, but we want to start up at 10 o'clock, and so use the time to view the displays that are over there, to learn about some of the works that are going on. Talk to Brother John if you would like about some of the things that he has said. But let's be back in here ready to go then sharply at 10 o'clock. We're dismissed.